Welcome back, Day Camp friends, to it's 7 now of the Day Camp Pod. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philadelphia suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake Park District, northwest of Chicago.
And I'm Aaron Gluckstein from Camp Robin Hood, located just outside of Toronto in Canada.
And we're day camp professionals, joining forces to provide a forum for us day camp pros to share ideas and best practices across North America and beyond. And for today's episode, we will be discussing free, unstructured play with the help of Kelly Jones of Outpost Summer Camps in San Diego. Oh man, we say that as Andy is in New Jersey and Aaron is in Toronto and Michael and Sam are in Chicago, and we are freezing. So we were all going to do the San Diego like thing and feel the energy and warmth of that. So yeah, we have Michael Brandwine back for a return engagement. He's going to tell you why in a moment. But first, I want to say that the Day Camp Podcast is brought to you by CRS, Commercial Recreation Specialists, fine purveyors of the best waterfront, water fun, and splash pad products in the world. Check out their website at crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun. And this Go Camp Pro podcast is also sponsored by the American Camp Association, New York and New Jersey, dedicated to preserving, promoting, and enhancing the quality of the summer camp experience. Their professional development includes the Tri-State Camp Conference, as well as many other conferences that can be found at aca-nynj.org. So, free unstructured play. So, all we do as camp people is complain about our camp parents that they over-program their children, right? And then we take their children, and I think most day camp people over-program their children at their day camps, in all, for good reasons. So, we're trying to do the right thing. And then I went to Banner Day Camp and visited them, and they start their days in a very interesting way that sort of reframe my brain on things. They bring in these hundreds and hundreds of kids on these buses, and as they arrive, they get out and they just play. And they drop their things, they drop their backpacks off at this assembly area in the middle where they have their Bannerama assembly, like a big stadium, like a Roman amphitheater, really. And then the kids are given time to just go off and play. And it's got to be 20, 30, 40 acres, and they're running around. Now, they're not shooting bows and arrows at each other or anything. They're playing basketball and hopscotch and really old school kind of things. And they're just playing. And I'm walking around at that time with Brad Schwartz. And honestly, as a regular day camp guy, I was sort of freaking out because I was like, where are the counselors? Where are the kids? Like I'm having like tremors because of my normal upbringing as a day camp professional, which is that, you got to have your ratio. It's got to be 6-to-1. You got to be with the kids. You got to walk them to the bathroom and all that kind of thing, right? And meanwhile, here were all these kids and hardly any staff. The staff were coming in off the buses and they were filling in the gaps. And it was like a Norman Rockwell painting. It was so stinking cool. And I was like, how do I do this? How do I capture this? Well, by the way, after like 20 minutes of this, they start playing like Wagner or some kind of like Flight of the Valkyries over the sound system, and all the kids they perk up and they just come running back to their morning assembly thing where Bannerama ensues and all craziness ensues, and it turns into a relatively more normal day camp day from that point. So I tried to integrate this into my camp, my existing camp that I was at. It wasn't easy. Couldn't really do it very well. When I started my own camp and I sort of built around it, then it worked much better. And what I do now is I do a 45-minute period for all age groups, not just preschoolers, all the way up until middle schoolers. They have a dedicated 45-minute period that we call free choice, only because I don't want parents that have negative connotations thinking that I'm not doing anything during free play. So I say, call it free choice. I give them a section of camp. I tell the counselors to break up into a zone defense. And at first they're very confused by that, but once they really understand that, they can play with the kids, I don't want them running anything during those periods. It turns out that now it's one of the favorite periods of the day for all ages across the board. And I got a lot of really great affirmation when I recently went to the Partnership for 21st Century Learning's Leadership Forum. They call it a summit in Washington, D.C., and I was with all these unbelievable schools because I give awards to these great schools that do great things. And I felt like an outsider. I thought I'm a camp guy. Like, I'm not like, I'm the sort of experiential educator, but am I a real educator? Like, I felt weird at first. And then when I started talking about what I do, I realized that they were all jealous of me They wish that they could do in their schools the things that we do in our camp. And the fact is that these exemplar schools are actually doing camp stuff. They're doing more and more camp stuff, and they're getting touted as futuristic, cutting-edge schools. And one of these sessions I went to there was given by the Disney people. Liz Fogel, who is now the head of P21, she gave the session with a couple other people, and it was all about creativity. And, you know, I'm a musician. So to me, creativity, I think about music and art and stuff like that. But according to these Disney folks, they're like, no, 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 no. Creativity is not music and art. Creativity is making choices and deciding what to do when there's a situation, or when there's nothing to do, what to do, right? Real creativity is about deciding what is best in certain moments, right? And really, there is no better place than that than in free play, than when kids are at the playgrounds. And I realize that some people think, well, there is a survival of the fittest element at the playgrounds, but there's also the ability to negotiate your relationships and make friends and you know, compromise, like the art of compromise. So it really changed the way I think about things. And now I am proud when I tell my camp parents that we have 45 minutes of free play. And I explain how their kids' brains are going to, their wiring is going to get nice and tight from it and all. So anyway, I was mentioning this kind of thing to Michael Brandwein. He said, oh my gosh, I know this great gal, Kelly, and her husband, Stu, and they run this great camp, and they do something really neat like that. So I'm going to pass the torch now to Michael, and Mike, you can take it from there.
Thanks, Andy. I want to introduce you to Dr. Kelly Jones, who was the director of Outpost Summer Camps in San Diego. She and her husband, Stuart Jones, founded this camp. Kelly, you'll have to correct me. Was it 18 years ago? About?
This will be our 18th summer coming up.
This is your 18th summer, yes. And I know them through conferences and their friends. And finally, this past summer, I got an opportunity to go to San Diego in conjunction with another conference at which I was speaking. And I went to visit. And we're so glad that you're here, Kelly. And the reason is because I want to tell people two distinctive things about your camp. And most importantly, what you don't see when you visit. Usually people say, oh, you saw this and you saw that. The first thing you don't see out of two is you don't see any buildings. You don't see a drama shed. You don't see an arts and crafts thing like that. You don't see you don't see anything. It's this large open field. And then out in the outer peripheral areas, there's a nice forest area, California style. The second thing you don't see are people walking around with the kind of hour to hour to half hour schedule that you would see at most day camps. Instead, what you see are kids, brace yourselves, just going out for huge parts of the day and just playing with their counselor, like their counselor was this big grown-up friend. And it's amazing. So I wanted to introduce you to Kelly. I hope, Kelly, that you'll describe camp to us now. And I just want to be sure that the purpose of this is up front. We're not going to be suggesting that people go and copy Outpost Camp. The entire camp is structured around this. What we're going to, I'll speak for myself, what I would suggest is that you take what Kelly and Stuart are doing at Outpost and what Andy just described at his camp. And what we do is we take a small part of our day and implement it, 30 minutes or 45 minutes, even if it's only once, twice, or 3 times a week. So what is this big it? Well, let's introduce you to Kelly.
All right, hello, thank you, Michael. And before I describe Outpost, I just want to make sure that I mention that our camp was modeled after Tom Sawyer Camp. So don't want to take credit for this way that it's structured, but the Schleicher family started that long ago, and then now the Horner family has been running it for quite a while. But you're right, Michael, that when you come, what you see, what we hope you see when you come to Outpost isn't the buildings or the activities or the things or the stuff. What we hope it looks like is we have about 1,500 kids over the course of the summer, but at day camp, usually you would see about 18 groups at a time there. And what we hope you would see would be 18 clumps of people. So 18 clumps, not lines, but circles, or gathering around the one or two focal points, which is the counselor. And what we've tasked the counselor with is, I love that you talked about creativity, Andy, because when we think of creativity, I used to, of course, say, oh, I'm terrible at art, so I'm not creative. And what we're looking for is creativity in the sense of creating fun and creating relationships. And so I think the opposite of that, what we're not going for, is being the counselor being a tour guide. So we're not having them take kids from place to place and lead an activity, but sometimes the taking itself to the next place is the activity itself. And so what the counselor is tasked with is creating fun and memorable things out of walking, out of sitting, out of eating, out of being somewhere together. And so it's a little bit hard to describe. I don't know what your first impression was, Michael, when you saw it just recently, but sometimes parents say, well, what do you do and what does it look like? Or they show up and say, where's camp? Why are all these groups, standing around? And I'm like, that is camp. So it's kind of hard to know what you're looking at without the lens. But again, what I'm looking for as I'm evaluating, different counselors walking around, is I'm looking for engagement, for opting in, for smiling, for relationships being built, and for the counselor to be at the beginning that focal point. And then as the session goes on, we have 3-week sessions, and I think that's an important factor, that allows us to build relationships with and between the campers. So as the session goes on, we want the counselor actually to become a little bit less of the focal point and have the group itself be that focal point where there's all these interrelationships, and they've then formed a group identity and a group culture. So one thing that I hope people see or notice, or that I'm scanning for as I'm evaluating, counselors and groups, is just complete ridiculousness and something special to that group. So for example, my son's group this summer, he's 7, and they named their group Jason Where's Your Helmet, which makes no sense. It means nothing to anyone. And he'd be like, Mom, you just don't get it. Which is really, that's what we want. We want it to be something that parents don't get, that really nobody gets except for those kids in that group. And so that we have an awesome staff member named Jason who's been with us forever. And whenever they would see Jason, they would just scream at the top of their lungs, Jason, where's your helmet? And that's something that he'll remember forever. And on every picture that he received, it said, Jason, where's your helmet? So that's one of those things that's kind of hard to explain, but that's what we're going for, is those experiences and those memories. So I guess when I talk to our new directors and staff, what I talk about is that we're not selling activities or mastery of things, but we're selling feelings and memories and skills that I believe translate to every relationship and job and school experience that they'll have. So that's what we're going for.
Well, Kelly, what you're masters of is what I like to call KDP. It has to be an acronym because it's brand line. Kid-directed play. I
Yes.
avoid unstructured because I think it's very structured.
I agree.
The structure is that it's focused. I call it KDP, kid-directed play. And one of the hard things about being a day camp director is that the day camp directors don't get to see other people's camps because they're too busy
Right.
running their own. So what I would like you to do is just take us through yours in just a couple of minutes. When the children arrive, they meet in a sort of amphitheater-like, that's too fancy of a word, but it's a raked kind of area with benches, right? Okay. And you have a general assembly, and that's a great subject for another podcast. But then after the kids do that, they go with their counselor. And how does your day start? It doesn't start by saying a volleyball or tennis at 9:35. What they do is they decide what they want to do with their time. So they have to discuss and they have to get themselves organized to play. So if I were a parent, what would I see at that moment as the kids gather around the counselor?
Right. So every morning it starts, we call it Blitz, and it's at the logs is what we call that area. So they start at the logs and they go out to their counselor. And I think the morning is probably the most unique part of the day, because towards the afternoon we do go to pool. Most of the age groups go to pool, but in the morning they play in various areas. And so I think one one place you'll see them playing is in the field. Another place you'll see them playing is in the wilderness preserve. And so in those instances, it is, I think, especially in the preserve, that really truly is child-directed or kid-directed play. In the field, it could be any combination of games led by senior counselors, junior counselors, by kids, or just silly, fun activities. It could be, you know, partner interviews or lunches or different things like that. So that's often, as opposed to that part being unstructured when they're out in the field, it's more unscheduled, I guess I would call it. So it's different for every single group, every single day. That looks different. And so for that reason, we encourage a lot of variety in that time. So that part is really related to our training, which I think we'll get into a little bit later, but that is truly unique to that counselor and that session and that exact day. So the fort time, I think, is really that child-directed play in the purest sense, because each group at our camp has what we call a fort. And again, if you saw it, you'd be like, this random patch of dirt. But yes, so it's about, they're usually about 20 feet by 20 feet, not constructed by us, but just random kind of nooks that we've identified in the wilderness preserve that we think are really cool areas for kids. And so every group, they go fort shopping on that first day of camp, and they select a fort together as a group. And then this becomes kind of their special wilderness place. And so for about an hour each day, they have fort time, and that is actually scheduled. They know when they're going to the fort just for safety reasons, but the time itself there isn't scheduled. And so that looks wildly different from group to group. And I've been asking certain kids this week, knowing that this podcast was coming up, and just saying, what do you do in your fort? Because it's so different for each group. And so I asked my son yesterday, and he said, Mom, I'm a gun fixer. And I said, what is that? What is that? So, and it was so funny, because as he's talking, there was still that element of, well, this is obviously how you do it, and you just go like this. And so he told me this intricate thing of how, well, we make a gun shop, and there's fixers, and there's buyers, and there's sellers, and there's generals, and they have this whole system. And I said, well, what do you do to fix a gun? And he said, well, of course, you take the stick and you take the rock, and then you usually need rubber bands, and probably 80 rubber bands. And, he just had this whole system. And I asked him, I said, did your counselor, her name was Allie, I said, did Allie bring anything with her? He goes, just rubber bands. I said, nothing else, just rubber bands. He goes, oh yeah, like a lot. And so that was there in terms of materials, it was rubber bands. But what they're doing is they're just using anything around them. So I'll travel from fort to fort. One is a salon, and they're giving mud tattoos. Another one, they have different shops, and they're using leaves as currency. Another one is a kingdom, and they all have their different positions in the, monarchy, or they have a government. And so certainly it's child directed, but it's not hands off. So it is, I kind of try to talk about counselor led versus counselor facilitated. So the counselor is very, very active in this time, and very engaged, and kind of in the best case, usually they're kind of around the periphery, drawing everyone to that fun. But a fort that's going well is every child is included, is engaged, is excited, and is actually making the fun, not passively enjoying the fun. And so
the key word here is trust. Because when you walk and see this group of kids in this area with, there's sticks on the ground and fallen logs, and it's this little nook, they make it their own. I visited one, it was like a shopping mall. They had developed their own bartering, and you're right, they use leaves and stones and sticks. Some of the kids want to run a store, some of them want to go build a store, some of them are probably lawyers and suing between the stores. I don't know what they were doing, but they don't all do exactly the same thing. But we have to trust kids to, when you provide them with an environment, that they do get more practice using their imagination to create their own fun. And if we don't give them that opportunity, if kids play is structured with the adults telling them, now we're going to do this drill, and now we're going to play this game, and now we're going to learn these 3 things. There is a place for that at day camp. But what I think Outpost does probably the best I've ever seen in all my visits at camps is that they trust children with their counselor to make fun up. So for example, after they do their blitz and they go out into a field, you'll see them in a circle, right, Kelly? They circle up and they have a discussion about what do we want to do today. And when we get to our fort, it's basically a clubhouse, but it's not built. It's not like a plywood clubhouse. They make it into a clubhouse. It's basically just a bunch of dirt and a bunch of sticks and a bunch of logs. And they see that their counselors trust them to make the fun and to make the games. And so what we would see is a meeting. They circle up in a group and they talk about, what do you want to play? We can play something in the field, then we can grab our lunches. We can go have lunches at our clubhouse areas or forts or whatever they want to call them. And it's that trust that does wonderful things for their brain. Kelly, you're trained as a clinical psychologist. That's the way you got into this.
Right.
What can you tell us about why a camp should incorporate these kinds of periods?
You know, I think the most important part about leaving that space for the kids to participate in it is that the more ownership that they have over what they're doing and creating, the more they take out of it. I mean, as adults, we can probably all relate to that. You know, just recently I went to a conference, to the WAIT conference, and there was a portion of the session where we sat and passively listened, and it was great. I loved what they were saying, but could I tell you what they were saying? I have no idea what they were saying, even though I really liked it. And then there was a portion where we actively participated in it, which included me getting kind of awkward and nervous, and I didn't really want to, and I played this ridiculous game and made a fool of myself. But it was awesome. It was fun. I remember it. I remember the exact point of it and why and how I felt and what it was like. So I think the more active the kids are in what they're doing, the more they take away from it. So one kind of simple way to put that would be, I think what we're trying to do at Outpost, or at least my passion and what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make it as much like real life as possible. So if camp is so very special and different from real life, that it's still good, and that can still be the source of a lot of wonderful feelings and relationships, but then everyone goes back to real life at school, and then they're that different school person. And so what we're trying to do is make Outpost as similar to real life as possible, and I think that's done through the kids truly engaging and owning that time. So one thing that's a little bit, I think, uncomfortable, and I'm not sure what you thought about it, Michael, but in the fort time, what my hope is that the counselor is very, intimately facilitating it, but they're not overly steering it and problem solving it. One of the first people I worked with in camp was Dr. Peter Giroux at Tom Sawyer camps. And I had my training for the social skills program I worked in with him. And we were just in a rush. So my entire training was don't fix it for them and don't tell them good job. That was it. That was my whole training. But that stuck with me because I thought that was, I just pondered this over and over and over as I would in that gap between my training and the next day when I started, what does it mean? What does it mean? And so that's what we're hoping for in that fort time, is we want the counselors to be very strongly facilitating and knowing and having their eye on ready to jump into something. But it's kind of like, no, wait, if someone wants to be the general, but someone wants to be the gun fixer and they're arguing, obviously it needs to be civil and respectful, but that's okay. Negotiate and problem solve it yourself, and that's going to be a skill to you. So I think of the camp groups as these little communities, little safe communities for my son personally. I keep mentioning him because we have 5 kids, but he's the one in day camp. And if he's going to struggle, I want him to struggle at camp, because that's a place where the struggle will be real, but there will be a safe adult who's highly trained that will help him navigate that and actively solve it himself, rather than you sit over here, don't do that, you do this, say sorry, that sort of thing. So I think we're trying to create, in an unstructured sense, a source of real relationships and engagement with each other, and fun for the purpose of fun, rather than overly telling them the meaning or how it's supposed to look.
Kelly, some people listening to this are going to say, well, but if you don't entertain the kids every moment, they'll say they're bored, that kids don't know how to play this way. And I saw that there were some who jumped in and were all ready to lead,
Right.
and others kind of walk around aimlessly. But rather than being rescued by a counselor, the counselor would say, "You want to play?" And they would kind of play together, and then they would join another two kids and they would play together.
Right.
What have you found the reaction is, and how do the children grow over the time? Because they're not in school. It's not every 5 minutes a different worksheet or a different thing up on the screen.
Right. I think there's two important things to mention. The first one is just that we really try to accurately portray what Outpost is. And so in that sense, we're hoping that we don't end up with families who are looking for their kids to be sort of passively entertained with activity after activity after activity. So we try to be pretty upfront about what we are doing and what we're not doing. So that, I think that's the first important part, is that we're getting kids, and especially parents, who want this for their kids, who want them to be our slogans kind of outside and unplugged. And so the parents that opt into that helps us, because they can also, I mean, we all know working in day camps that a challenge that's a little unique to day camps is that the kids go home on that first day. And unless that first day was absolutely magical, I didn't know anybody, it was lame, it was boring, you know, and then if the parent isn't committed to that mission, then they call and say that my kid is bored. And so having the parents understand what they're paying for and opting into, that's the first step. But the second step is where I think there's different kinds of boredom. And so if there's one child who's bored, then that's more related to that child. If there's a group and there are 4 kids who are bored, that's way more related to the counselor and the group. And so that really, we differentiate between that, because we're going to attack those difficulties in different ways. And sometimes boredom doesn't mean a kid is saying they're bored. It means 4 kids have a stomach ache every day at 2 p.m. Okay, 2 p.m. is boring in this group, you know. But I think the best way to explain how we handle boredom when it comes up is that we think of the group as, I think of it as a magnet. So we're trying to kind of draw them into the magnet of the fun in the group. And so what we don't do is we don't try to convince them that it's great or that it's awesome, or try to talk them into it. We try to have them want to join back in. And so I kind of think of it as, I know every parent has had their child say, "I'm bored," and then we go, "Oh," that's never a phrase that you want to hear as a parent. But I think one reason why parents hate that phrase so much is because it's kind of like, if a child says, "Mom, I'm bored," they're passively handing me their problem and saying, "You solve it." And so that's something that we typically hand right back to them and say, "No, you solve it." Not in that way, but in a way to where we say, well, what can you do about that? Or what is it that we can help you with? So bored doesn't usually mean bored. It's never the case at camp, or at our houses for that matter. It's never the case that there's literally nothing to do. That's never the case. So
Kelly,
what problem are we trying to solve? Is it, you know, friendship? Is it, this is so different from my house and what I'd rather be doing, you know, that sort of thing.
Kelly, could I jump on your
Oh,
magnet idea?
Yes.
That's wonderful. I know when we do ours, every now and then you'll have one child that just kind of doesn't know what he wants to get involved with in the groups. But if the counselor starts to play with that child, you always end up with a whole group. So, you know, for instance, if you say, "Well, do you want to play this with me?" and you sit down at the table, next thing you know, you look around and there's 10 kids with you.
Mm-hmm.
It really does ebb and flow.
Right.
And as long as you're helping them with their momentary indecision as to which way they want to go, they usually get absorbed really quickly back into the group.
Right. And I think the word that you just said, Sam, momentary, is so important, because when you're a counselor, and especially a young first-year counselor, and a child says, "I'm bored," it's like, oh, you know, they feel like, oh no, they hate camp, it's horrible. But if you talk to, you know, our kids are ages 3 to 14, our campers. And if you talk to a 3-year-old at 8 a.m. and then 10 a.m. and then 12, you know, or even 8:01, 8:02, 8:03, it's a different life. It's a different day, you know, and so helping them know that bored at that exact time of the day doesn't really relate to the previous part of the day or the next part of the day. And so, so we try not to engage too much with that sentence and try to convince them, "No, it's great, it's great, it's great." But we try to, like you said, invite them into something.
Well, Kelly, one of the greatest things I saw this summer at your camp was Stuart and I were walking around, and over my shoulder I saw a bunch of pre-teenagers or teenagers, and they had hoses and buckets and sponges, and I couldn't tell what they were doing. Were they going to have a water fight, or what were they doing? They were washing one of the vans. And so I turned to Stu and I said, how do you get them to wash your vans? And he smiled at me and he said, Michael, we don't get them to do it. That's when we circled up, they said, let's wash the van. And that's what they wanted to do. And they had a great time. And they were playing and they were singing. And this is an example of how when you trust kids to come up with what they want to do, and you provide a safe environment in which to do it, and some guidance where required, kids can be trusted. I love what you said about when kids say, I'm bored. We need to train counselors, of course, instead of immediately jumping into, oh, I need to now do a song and dance and entertain them. Instead, they need to say, okay, well, tell me why you think it's boring, and what can we do about the fact that you think it's boring? How can we make this interesting? That's the key question. What can we do in order to make this more fun or more exciting? But notice there, the responsibility is shared with the group. It's not something that the adult does to rescue the children. That's really important. Would you please tell people real quickly, when you interview staff, you're looking for staff that are able to do this less directed, trusting kind of thing with this kid-directed play. There's something you do in interviewing. Would you share that with everybody? Because it's something all day camp people can do when interviewing.
Yes, we have a few different activities that we do. So the first thing that we usually do is that every interview is typically a group interview to start with, and then they'll get invited to an individual interview. But we have 3 different activities that we'll do, usually just one of the 3, but we'll either have them do a group skit or a group game or teach each other a skill. And so in all 3 of those instances, it usually entails we have a box of toys, like they're truly random toys from my playroom, and we'll hand them to them. They have there's no rhyme or reason to them. We break up the group interview into smaller groups and hand each group a box of toys, and we just say, make up a skit, or make up a game, or teach a skill. And there's no purpose to this. There's no objective. It's not supposed to meet a certain criteria. And I think what the staff experience first is a little bit of anxiety, and so in that sense, if that's too much and weird to perform a silly skit in front of their peers with random objects, if that's torture, then we kind of hope that there's also self-selecting out of this job for the summer. But what we see when it does work is we basically see 3 to 4 young adults, and they're making up something that's just so silly and weird, and it's not about what they're saying or understanding the joke. It's kind of just about going for it. And so the funniest ones I've seen, sometimes I don't even know what they're saying or what they're doing, but they're just laughing, and they're just creating something from nothing. Right. So they're creating something funny or interesting or weird. And so I hope too that what they're experiencing is what we value. So we value them going for it. We value them problem solving as it didn't go how they thought it was going to go. We value them, sticking with it and persisting, even though it's awkward and weird. And we also value them knowing that there's no, okay, you met the final goal. It's just, okay, that was it. And if it didn't work, we laugh. And if it was funny, we talk about it, and it becomes an inside joke. And so it's really about the process and the doing rather than the perfecting or making sure not to fail. And so we also really try to make our interviews non-competitive. So it's a lot about working together and rooting for each other, which is something that's important in our camp, of course. And so they're not fighting against each other for the job. We have many jobs. They could all get invited for individual interviews and all work at the camp. And so we're trying to help them root for each other. And we ask them, who stood out to you? What did you notice? Why did you like them? And so they're also evaluating each other, and that's really important to us as well. So we're hoping that those sorts of activities really reveal the qualities that we're going for, which is creating something. And I asked one of our newer directors, who was a senior counselor last year, I said, what do you think is different? Because she's worked for some other camps. And she said, I think because we are tasked with creating rather than being tour guides. She says, I think that you guys were showing us that this takes a lot of commitment. And so once we actually accept the job and accept the gravity of the job, we're committed because we are camp. Camp is the staff rather than rather than camp is the cool activity or structure or building that we have.
Yeah, the people who basically invented improvisational theater had a phrase. It started largely here in my city of Chicago, but they called it, and it's the title of a book by Jeffrey Sweet. They call it something wonderful right away. That builds on what you said, something from nothing. That's what improvisation is. You're on a stage, nothing exists, and you create a world and relationships with other people. And the real reason this is so important is, and let me reach. I want to show people this book, and if you're just listening, I'm holding up a book by Daniel Pink, and the book is called A Whole New Mind. I always have recommended this book to camp directors because the subtitle of the book is Why Right-Brainers Will Rule the Future. And so I just want to talk for 60 seconds about the fact that it's the right side of our kid's brain, as well as our own, that creates. And most specifically takes something on the left side and something on the right side and puts the two together and creates something wonderful right away, something that never existed before. So when we get kids to make up their own fun, and when we get them to walk into an area and imagine it as something and try to figure out how to make something exciting and not be bored, but instead invigorated by it, that's developing the right side of their brain. And the thesis of Pink's book is that right brain people are going to rule the world for the simple reason that computers can't do this. Mm-hmm. So when we train our children to do these kinds of things, we're preparing them for a world where they will not be replaced as easily by computers. So this is the way we explain it to parents. Yes, we have a period every day or 3 days a week where we're working on the kids' right side of the brain, not just with arts and crafts, not just with art, but wouldn't it be cool if arts and crafts, and I always beg arts and crafts people to do this, but wouldn't it be cool if once a week, I mean, how hard would it be to just let kids come into arts and crafts and give them a bunch of paint and glue and marshmallows and who knows what else and say, you decide what the project is today. You make something. Why do we always have to lay it out for them and say, today we're going to make a penguin? Well, maybe we're not going to make a penguin.
Michael, you just took my whole art theory.
Yeah, so I want to turn it over to Sam Thompson, because at her camp, they do this brilliantly. Go, Sam.
We have free play an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. In the morning, they have free swim, so they can do whatever they want in the water, you know, with counselors there nearby to ooh and ah over their antics. And then playground as well. But they can also make up games. For instance, Teen Camp made up some game last year called Grandma's Pants. And it was a version of tag. And they played it for hours. Teen campers played this tag game with counselors for hours. And anybody new that week just joined in, and it was wonderful to see. At one point, they decided to put on a wedding in our wedding venue. And they did everything for the week, every little prop that went with it, and held a wedding and invited the rest of the camps to the wedding. So those kind of things are really fun. The thing I really love too is in the afternoon, one of their choices or electives, which is a whole nother podcast, is if they want to do the art, it is a free art. So on the one side, we will teach them something like finger knitting or keychain, you know, plastic keychain things, something they can put in their backpack and work on anytime they want, wherever they want, as many times as they want, that they can take with them. So it's not just a one and done, it's an ongoing thing. The other thing is, like Michael said, we'll throw out every kind of thing you can think of and say, go for it. Popsicle sticks are the best thing invented ever. I was at, I have a before and after school program too. So I've got my kids 365 days a year. So you really have to spark them every now and then because they're sick of me. They're sick of where they are, you know, they need. So I was at a site and I just went in the back closet and started pulling out things. And the counselors at that site were newer and didn't realize they could do that. It's like, yes, you can just go back there and say, what if we do this color paint and 5 pieces of this and see what they make? And what they make is always amazing to me. Or like Michael taught us early on, have art under the table today, or go outside and just lay out the butcher paper.
Right.
And let them go nuts with the butcher paper. I kind of like having butcher paper somewhere all the time, just so they can lay down on the ground and just start drawing. So yeah, art can be really fun. No project is wrong. But that's something, unfortunately, we have to teach our staff nowadays, is that there's not a set way to do it, and then not have an example.
I think one of the things you guys touched on, which is important, is that, to quote the Fresh Prince, parents just don't understand. Like they, we've been going down this like rabbit hole of like here's stuff, over program. And we do need to figure out how to communicate this to parents so they understand that this is so stinking important, which it is. I mean, just think of when you're in line at the bank or at the store or something like that. People don't talk to each other anymore. They look at their phones, right? So we're losing this whole aspect. Kids don't know how to be alone anymore. They don't know how to have time. And of course they don't, because, all of a sudden somebody decided you could put a DVD into a car. And then when they were driving around the corner to get milk, they had to watch 5 minutes of a Disney movie on the way to get there, right? So kids are being raised. We are getting kids at our camps that have been raised that have no idea what free time is and how to utilize it. They're constantly, need something in their hands. There's a website and there's a group, I think they're called Let Grow. Lenore Skenazy put this together. It's a great blog. Lenore is the Free Range Kids lady from New York. We had her speak at Tri-State a few years ago. It's a great blog, and it shows how schools are understanding this, and schools are starting to take recess a lot more seriously. Another thing I wanted to touch on, which is related to the parent, is the trust thing. Michael said it. It is all trust. Mm-hmm. There's so much trust involved here. And in regards to the parents need to trust you, right? They need to trust the camp that you know what is good for their kids, right? The camp needs to trust the counselors, that the counselors are going to be able to handle these kind of things, right? And not just be handing them little agendas of everything to do at every moment, right? And we have to trust that the kids, that it's not going to be anarchy. It's not going to become Lord of the Flies, right? If you raise the bar of expectations of these kids' behaviors, they will aspire to it, right? And honestly, that's the first feeling I had when I was walking around Banner Day Camp, like, why aren't these kids killing each other, right? And then it seemed so silly that I was thinking that, right? And then I gave a talk about free play at Tri-State last year, and a camp director from a really good camp raised their hand and said, how come they're not killing each other? And it's like, well, at baseball, are they hitting each other over the head with bats during baseball? No, because you have counselors and you have a level of decorum, like you have a culture at your camp. And the same thing applies to unstructured play, kid-directed play, as Michael said, which is really the way you got to say it. I have so many notes. I just want to say another couple little things. Another easy way to integrate free play into a day camp is something that I think Kelly and Sam both touched on, which is during free swim. Right? During free swim does not have to be this militaristic strip down and get in the pool kind of thing. It can be a 45-minute or whatever time period where they can swim, they can hang out over here, they can do something over there. It should be a free period, right? I think it's awesome that Sam has an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, right? That is way more than most camps. All right. Yes, Tom Sawyer and Outpost are sort of, outliers when it comes to this, but integrating it into your program is possible. And most every day camp that has some sort of water related thing has a free swim period. Don't make it such a thing that you have to go swimming. Put some alternate things around and let the kids just relax. Right. Yeah. And I want Aaron to chime in, because Aaron wrote in the program notes that they're having trouble in fully embracing it. The parents resist.
Yeah,
right. So
Aaron,
Aaron's of
Aaron, I just want to say something lovely about Robin Hood Day Camp, which I brag about constantly at conferences. Aaron, you've got one of the best camps in the universe where staff and kids make decisions about what their schedule will be like for the week. And I hope you'll weigh in on that and explain to people a little how that works, because there's trust too. And it's something that every camp can learn from.
Yeah. So, something that's, interesting about, just when listening to, all the different, slightly different approaches that, this group has taken towards free play, we have gone from an approach where, the facilities were never a number one priority for us. It was always about the experience that the kids got with the staff. When the camp started, when Robin Hood started on the current location, it was just basically an open field with a swimming pool and a barn where indoor activities would take place, and everything was built sort of around that. The demands of parents and expectations of, more structured programming have, weighed in on what we've done and what we've built and added to the site. But an element of what we've maintained throughout this whole time is that the counselors are given autonomy to do for defined segments of the day to run activities with the kids. We call it cabin fun, and it's a little bit more structured than the way some of this free play talk has gone. But we've had a discussion at our last meeting last week about how we can implement a less structured version of that that cabin fun time into it. And one of the biggest issues is, and it's just, no different than than many other areas across North America, is that parents are have the expectation of what are we doing at this time, and how much time do they need to, how come they have 6 minutes to walk from one activity to the next? What were they doing for that extra 1 minute where the activity wasn't running? And parents are actually, asking us for, to send home schedules. And we do have schedules that are, planned in half an hour segments, but we're very resistant to providing those to parents, because we like to have flexibility in our day to if the kids, once in a while don't want to participate in a specialty, then we want to be able to say, okay, the counselors know the kids and they know what the kids like to do, and why not, do something fun in the cabin, or, play with a ball in the field, or, just run around and do some cool activity that, that the counselors come up with. And, the idea of doing, making the most of, because as we've evolved into more of a structured, program over the years, the opportunities for counselors to be creative and to do these sort of independent, independent unstructured activities, the time has been limited. So the transition activity sort of theme has come into our staff training, on a regular basis, and we encourage our staff through examples and through harnessing their own creativity to come up with different activities that they can do with the kids while they're just moving from one area to the next. And we've had some amazing counselors who the kids, you just hear the kids screaming and yelling and having fun as they move from activity to activity. When I say screaming and yelling, one activity that became popular a few years ago was run and scream, or something. They called it something like that, and they had to run and so things like that really made gave the counselors an opportunity to do something cool and creative in an unstructured forum. And the kids, we know the kids remember those moments more than all the fancy, arts and crafts and, whatever other activities that, they've done during the day. They remember those moments. And, I can speak from experience, and as a child, remembering those times that you spend, with your cabin together. We had some of the best times sweeping out our cabin and cleaning it, believe it or not, back as a camper, because the counselor would say, here's a broom, and, you guys have to do whatever it is. And it was kind of, supervised free time in a sense, but we just made the most of those experiences, and those are opportunities to learn from each other, cooperate, develops an ability to problem solve within the group. And one thing that I just want to mention quickly that Michael said, which was just like resonated with me, was that to highlight the benefits of what we're doing in these free periods of time. Working on the right side of the brain is what you said, right? And we've had a lot of we spent a lot of time here we have a lot of immigrant communities growing in the surrounding area where our camp is located, and we're trying to reach out to those groups. And just the idea of day camp in general is hard for them to fathom. And so we've used different approaches to reach out and explain and educate the benefits of camp to those families, because a lot of those families are the kind that are used to sending their kids to summer school or to specific educational experiences during the summer, and they're missing, we know, and we found that they are missing the opportunity to have their kids develop the right side of their brain, essentially. So whether it's new immigrants or selling the idea of increasing our unstructured time at camp, I think that that line that idea resonates with me, and I think that's something we can use to to help us.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why the Chinese people are so enamored with American camp directors and are sending their kids to American camps is to learn these social skills, right? Because they recognize that their school system, which, by the way, is it's old-fashioned and all, so is the American school systems in general. It's, sitting in these 5 rows and being lectured at and all that kind of thing, that the kids are not learning the skills that are necessary for the 21st century that they're really going to need, as Kelly was touching on.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Andy, can I mention 2 quick resources that would help people get started?
Sure.
Would that be okay? All right. If you're wondering, how do you get your staff to buy into this kind of activity leadership? In my book, Training Terrific Staff, Volume 2, there's a whole chapter called Creating a Creative Camp Community, and it explains how you can incorporate this into your training. And in my book, Learning Leadership, there's a concept called FOTAY, F-O-T-A-Y, and that is what I call figure out the activity yourself. An example of that is if you give kids a round ball, and you take the ball and stuff it into a sock, and you push the ball all the way to the end of the sock, you'll have a neat thing that you can swing around over your head and throw considerable distances. The idea of this is to take, I'm trying to do that here now so to show you, but what you want to do is you want to take maybe 5, 6, or 7 of these and bring them out to a field with counselors or with campers, and then say, FOTAY, figure out the activity yourself. And what you do is discover that you can trust children to make out incredible plans and games that they can use this particular prop with. Even the full FOTAY, as I call it, is to just bring out a basket of dented ping pong balls and a long sleeve shirt and a broken tennis racket with no strings in it and an ice cube tray, and ask staff as well as campers when the session begins to create activities with this. And this stimulates their ideas and helps them develop those critical skills that are in the right hemisphere of the brain. Those are 2 great ways to train staff and also to lead children. These are great activities to use with your CIT and LITs as well.
Right. So when I talk to other camp directors, day camp directors, of course, 90% of the suggestions that you make to a day camp director is met with, we don't have time. We don't have time in our day for this.
Right, right.
And this is something that I reiterate in all of our programs, in all of our podcasts, that if you make this a priority, you can make time for it. Right? If you make this an important thing, you can do it. Whether it's during free swim, whether you dedicate an hour of time a day or whatever it is, or you reconfigure your program, you can do this. If be creative yourself, right? And make this a priority. And free play, it may take a little bit of investment, but really it's cheaper than any of your cafeterias, guaranteed, right? $25,000 climbing apparatus or a bag of rubber bands or a bunch of balls with socks, as Michael's saying, right? I mean, for this, it makes sense on so many levels. It is win, win, win. And I understand that parents, you know, are too frightened to do this at home, right? That's part of the issue here, is that parents, I live on a cul-de-sac in a little McMansion development and nobody's outside, okay? Tomorrow it may snow. There will be no snowmen anymore. Everybody's indoors looking at their screens. So parents are not trained to let their kids just go outside and play anymore, right? You read all the time, parents get arrested for letting their kids go around the corner and stupid stuff like that. So it in a way, we as day camp directors, like we're like the last bastion, like we're holding on to this old school, super important thing, right? So I hope that there's more and more camp directors like us that are listening to this, that won't fall into the trap of over programming. Okay. And that being said, we got to move into our last little section, which is program tips. Okay. But these program tips are brought to you by our friends at AM Skyer, the leading insurance broker for the finest camps in America. For almost 100 years, AM Skyer has been a strategic partner with summer camps, ready to support any needs arising in PR, legal issues, health, facility, and more. Experience the AM Skyer difference, and congratulations to Jeff Skyer, who got married this weekend. So we're going to go around the circle. Michael is going first because we skipped it last time.
Oh, that's okay.
Ready?
Okay.
You want me to go? Are you ready?
I'm ready. I got it. Okay.
Go ahead.
G3. G3 stands for Great Greeting Group. So here's my day camp programming idea. Form a committee of 2 or 3 staff, and they're in charge every morning of greeting the children in a creative way when they arrive. And I'm mentioning this in this podcast because, again, don't tell them what to do. Give them the trust to create an activity. It can be as simple as a costume piece. So just to give you a specific example, when parents pull up, when buses pull up, when kids ride their bikes to your camp, big or small, what the Great Greeting Group, the G3, are all wearing winter coats, parkas, and mufflers, and gloves, giant gloves, and they're standing there, and they have a big sign that says, "We have the coolest camp." The next day, they may blow bubbles that the kids have to burst through when they come walking up. The third day, there may be music playing. There are no rules here, but the idea is, particularly since day camps have such a great opportunity to impress parents every day when parents drop kids off, or when kids come off the bus and you want to make a great impression, empower staff to be part of these weekly committees. It can be a different group every week, to think of really fun ways of greeting the kids as they come before they go to their individual day camp groups. As always, when you start the day off in a creative way, it sets the environment to be able to build more creativity and have more fun throughout the rest of it.
I can't add anything to that. It's so important to do that. You cannot take that kind of thing for granted. Like, you can really spark the fire at the beginning of your days. It's really true. All right. So mine has to do with the number 3 also. It's 3-team color war. All right. Most camps that do color war, and we can do an episode on this one day, do 2 teams. It's red against blue or whatever kind of thing like that. And then half the camp is going up the other half of the camp, and half the camp loses, and half the camp's angry at the other half of the camp. And it's not really very functional, especially when people do it at the end of the summer. And I got this from a couple of sleepaway camps. They simply added a 3rd team. And now all of a sudden, one of the teams is in first place and the other 2 aren't. And when there's 3 teams, you all of a sudden didn't expect that you would necessarily win. And just, it's a sort of cheap psychological trick. It also makes the groups that practice their songs and stuff a lot more manageable for the staff. But yeah, real simple, short and simple. 3-team color war, so much better than 2.
I'll try to make mine within the theme of 3 as well. So mine, very simple activity, just going along the the lines of the free play discussion we were having. One really great activity I saw one of our staff organized last summer was a safari, and it was it involved absolutely nothing, not one costume, not one prop at all, but a bunch of the counselors and then later the kids, became safari animals. And there was a I don't know what the proper term is for the leader of the safari, but there was a tour guide, and that changed. The role of tour guide changed hands, but they walked around this area for I think it was an hour, and it was a small group of kids, and they just kept walking around, and different people were in different roles, and they were loving the fact that they were touring and seeing all these different jungle animals, and they truly didn't know what animal they were going to find next, because there were different kids playing different roles each time, and it was just an interesting approach to take, giving the counselor a part of the membership in the group rather than taking the lead. So again, something that you guys do, but not something that we do regularly in terms of that free play theme, and we loved seeing that. And so safari day, safari hour, safari 5 minutes, or walking from one activity to the next as a safari tour guide could work too.
Cool.
That's awesome. That's such a creative, awesome idea. And no doubt, like the age kids that we serve, you throw the word safari in anything and it's going to be successful. I think generally. I mean, my brother is a camp director, young guy, and he was in a sort of free play kind of situation trying to get the kids excited. And he brought in, I think, a bunch of stuffed animals and put them around the camp and drove kids on in his golf cart and said, "We're going to go on a safari." And it was extremely successful. So yeah, just super cute.
So mine's tie-dye outside the box. We buy our tie-dye from the RIT company before camp starts, and we do tie-dye every other week, but it's not your typical bring your white t-shirt and that's what we do. Maybe the first week that's what they do, but once they learn how, they bring pillowcases, beach towels, socks. If they forget something for the day, they call mom and say, "Can I take my socks off and do them right now?" Or "Can I do my t-shirt and wear my bathing suit all day?" And most of the time, mom or dad will be like, "Sure, I don't care, just do it." So they become professionals at the tie-dye. You can do it outside, couple buckets, easy cleanup, no problem.
Mhm.
I also wanted to just do a opportunity that's coming up. April 1st through the 3rd is Mid-States Camp Conference, and April 1st, the Monday, is a day camp only conference day. This year we have Dr. Dana Winters from Fred Rogers organization. Yay. We have Mr. Michael Brandwine.
Mhm.
We have somebody coming from California doing Where Are Their Big Boy Pants? It's a training session for your counselors. We have somebody doing how to start a new camp. Somebody specializing on teen camps. There's 10 other choices. Can't go into all of them, but if you want another learning opportunity, that's a good one coming up.
And Sam, that's at
Yeah, I mean,
acamidstates.org.
I have to say, if someone here, the
Yes.
Mid-State Conference is probably,
acamidstates.org.
Thank you, Michael.
and it's the most centrally located conference in the continent, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the first day is a day camp conference, in essence.
Yep.
Right.
All day
perfect for the
Monday.
day camp pod. We'll donate. I'll give you $5, Sam. We'll be sponsors. Okay, it's a day camp pod. Day camp pod. We're on a low budget here.
Send us a raffle.
All right.
prize.
Kelly, you have anything? I know we didn't prep you for this. But
I was kind of thinking about it. Ooh, are they going to ask me? So here's what I came up with in the last minute. Sticking with the number 3. So this is the most simple thing, costs 0 money, and could take 2 seconds or a long time, but something that's a hit with our campers ages 3 through 14. And this could be a transition or could be the thing itself, is sneaking up on other groups. So that sounds very simple, but they'll do it in lots of different ways. So so they'll just sneak up and surprise them, and every single kid will be engaged and will be just laughing with delight. Just no matter if they are sneaky or aren't sneaky, they just find it hilarious. So they'll sneak up on them, or they'll play a trick where they stand right next to the group and they stare up in the sky and they say, whoa, look at that. Yeah, whoa. And they try to get the other camp to look. And then when they do, they just erupt and cheer and freak out, and very exciting. A third way they might sneak up on a group would be to just start talking in accents, or talking about something weird and trying to maybe get them to cheer or join in. And then again, everybody goes crazy. So just some kind of silly things that usually brings group unity and gets them really excited. Like, remember when we did this? And they ask to do it again. So, so sneaking up on other groups.
God, it's so important for us to grow this kind of creativity with our kids and our staff so that they can be doing this 100 years from now, hopefully. Right? This is such simple, easy stuff, yet it's just home run things, right? And you know, for someone like myself that didn't go to a camp until I went to sleepaway camp when I was older, like my world was free play in my street, in front of my house, like in my neighborhood. Like that, I went to free play camp every day, and I would do things like you're talking about, like Erin's safari or Kelly's, you know, sneak up on people thing. Like that was what we did, and it was fun and it was great. You know, it's so easy to walk around a camp conference in an exhibit hall and let's buy this thing and let's buy this thing and let's buy this thing and create these programs around stuff when there's so much stuff that you could just create on your own, right? So thank you all for your tremendous insight and your contributions to this podcast. As usual, we have pages and pages of notes from this, and hopefully we'll compile them. We'll get Kelly's information up online as well as Michael's and his books and all. That's the show. So thanks again to the Go Camp Pro people, AM Skyer, ACA New York, New Jersey, Commercial Recreation Specialist, for allowing us to bring this podcast for you. We would not be able to do this if it wasn't for their contributions and such and support. Check out our show notes on daycamppodcast.com. Send us some feedback. We need some ideas for some future podcasts. You don't want to miss an episode. Subscribe to us on iTunes and such. I've been having a fun time at camp fairs this winter, going up to my camp director friends who are older than I am, showing them the podcast app and saying, this is what you do, this is how you subscribe and all that kind of thing. So we're making headway slowly but surely. So we'll be back real soon. Our next topic I want to do is going to be family visiting. All day camps do it differently. Some don't do it at all. So we're going to talk about that. Thanks again for listening in. This has been the Day Camp Pod.